Greeting my friends, welcome to the Rebel Moon podcast, hacking the future so you can gain the edge. But not today, because I'm going to do something what I promised to do yesterday. Now, many moons ago, I covered the mysterious going on in Afghanistan. And I mean many years ago, we're talking about back to 9/11 days. And this happened in the mountains that were they call Bora Bora, which has a complex cave system thought to be an Al-Qaeda stronghold. And if you remember, that's where they said Osama bin Laden was hiding, which is a lot of rubbish because a lot of those mountains, like something around, they're very magnetic. I can't see a guy running a massive operation from a cave where you can't even get a single in most places. But there you go. Now, like I said, this was during the alleged war on terror, when they were hunting for bin Laden, who the US said was holed up there. Eventually, some US soldiers stumbled on a cave entrance where a vicious gun battle broke out with the Al-Qaeda forces. But the Al-Qaeda were eventually defeated by the US forces. And that's where the story ends, my friends. At least in the mainstream media little snippet. Now, the public attitude at that time was, it was like by a war-weary American public, and indeed almost everyone else in the world was war-weary. So we sound like, yeah, big deal, another skirmish, let's move on, we're not interested. And that's exactly what the establishment wants to do, and the media. But outside the controlled media, there were more links were emerging about what really took place in those mountains. So before we delve into this hidden world, just remember, you've got to keep an open mind. It's a little hint to keep dropping for a very good reason. Never be too quick to dismiss anything that sounds out of your normal reality. Keep an open mind until you've done a little bit of research, because trust me, once you start going down these rabbit holes, you will start learning more and more until the bigger picture begins to connect as you stumble across like more pieces of the jigsaw along the way. And furthermore, I would like to venture as far to say that there is no better time to start searching for the many truths now that are being kept hidden from the human species, not just for hundreds of years, for thousands of years. So that way you're mentally prepared for what is to come. And the reason is simple, guys. We are entering a time of great revelations over the next few years, as I've said before, and especially once the elite bloodlines and all the cabals and corporations have been taken down, which you can see is a work in progress at the moment. And that being, yes, the same bloodlines who have been busy suppressing all kinds of knowledge and technology from us for a very long time. Long time before your great-great-grandparents were born. And knowledge and technology they've kept a secret so they can use it to gain great advantage over the rest of us, which has allowed them to stay in power and control for many bygone generations. Now, the story is being leaked out at the time with this vicious gun battle in the mountains. They started to get stranger and stranger. So I started digging like you do. Now then, these soldiers apparently weren't ordinary soldiers, they were special ops. And they were on a mission in this harsh and hostile terrain of Afghanistan. And in Afghanistan, this particular region was known as the Middle Eastern Bermuda Triangle. Not just Afghanistan, but outsiders as well, because people went in and never came out. And which explains why at some point, this group of special ops, they lost their bearings and they find themselves lost. And as I explained before, like as in around some of these mountains, they've got very heavy metal deposits, they're kind of magnetic, and that can cause problems with compasses and comms. You know, you get this in other places as well. It's same in the Highlands. Some places you can't even get a phone signal. So it's no big deal, but these are kind of like magnetic. There's weird stuff goes on in there, magnetic anomalies. Anyways, these Special Forces team, first they met up with this CIA agent who explains the mission. And the mission is to find a very important Afghan cleric in the Ghazni province of Afghanistan. And as the squad carry on with the mission and they go further into the mountains to try and find this guy, they have quite a few bizarre encounters. Now, first of all, they walk into an ambush by unknown gunmen. And this is where the reported vicious gun battle broke out, which cost the life of one of the team. And that's where the media ended it. They didn't even tell you about that one of them died. Now, there's a little bit more to that story, because the special ops team, they engaged these ambushers and they eventually overcame the gunmen. But when they went to check the bodies, lo and behold, they'd disappeared. There was no corpses there. They'd gone. Like they'd been dragged away somewhere. And over that terrain, you think, how the hell can that happen? Anyhow, later that night, the team spot some headlights somewhere down the mountain, and they thought it was a vehicle approaching in the distance. Heading up this mountain, they're thinking, God, we didn't know there was a road there. But like you say, you can't see anything like. But it turns out it wasn't a vehicle, because as it got closer, the two headlights suddenly split into two, flew off in different directions at a really vast speed, and then woof into the sky and disappeared. So later, they're getting a bit freaked out. They're trying to radio for a helicopter supply drop, but they can't get any reception on the radio, and they can't get any GPS readings. So at that point, they do what you do. You push further into the mountain complex, and they were trying to find a location basically where they could get some kind of communication signal, and then they could call in some help. Anyhow, then things got really strange. The following morning, what they'd done, the guy who got shot, their comrade, they'd kind of like cached him. What they called caching. They just put him somewhere safe, and then they went back and to collect this body to take him to the next location, and they found that the body had been ripped apart while they were gone and left scattered across the rocks. I know it sounds weird, but these events actually happened. Now, there was a lot more, and for that reason, because they're hard to swallow, I'm not going to go into all the strange events that the team encountered, because you'd think it was somebody on like LSD or something. But suffice to say that all this stuff bordered on the occult or the supernatural. For instance, the water in the canteens turned to sand, and their Afghan guide, when he got near this place, he was freaking out, and he was warning them that they are dealing with a supernatural phenomenon that is beyond human conception. And this guy was really freaking out, and he warned him and begged him and pleaded him, don't go any further, this is as far as I go. And he tried to tell him about, look, there are deadly consequences if you go ahead. And eventually this guy, he was so scared, this Afghan guide, he was so terrified about something, he took his own life by jumping over a cliff. Jumped to his death, rather than suffer a fate, because they all knew, like local people, they get very, very superstitious about these places. You just don't go to them. They're forbidden. Anyways, strangely enough, the team eventually reached an area, and this area was where an entire British regiment disappeared. That was back in the 19th century. Remember, Afghanistan, you've had Alexander the Great, he couldn't conquer it, he just bypassed it and went on to conquer India. Then the British came in, And then later, that was about 100 and odd years ago, 103 years ago, during the British Empire. And then later on, the Russians came in, built all the roads and bridges, but were just wide enough, coincidentally, to take a T-34 tank. So they're building roads ready to invade it. But the Russians got kicked out as well. They just found out it's just pointless, it's too much money, and it's basically impossible. And then, as we know, we've had the US there for the past couple of decades as well, and now they're giving up the ghost as well. Now then, so this was an entire British regiment, my friends, not one or two people, and they were investigating. Now, I don't know what history tells you why they were there, same reason as why they do these days, but it wouldn't have been for oil and things like that back then. So they were investigating this area where local folklore told them about strange flying objects shaped like triangles. And they've been seen and reported over many, many years. But somehow the British Empire at the time had acquired knowledge that told them that the flying triangles were much more than old wives' tales and urban folklore, hence why they went to investigate it. Now then, the Special Ops team, they didn't know that the strange events that they encountered during this mission through these mountains. They didn't realise that they were going to be absolutely nothing for what lie ahead of them. And indeed, it's what started the leaks as well. Otherwise, all this previous knowledge about strange events, they probably would have never surfaced at all. Because, you know, it's like people who see UFOs. They're frightened of saying something because they think they might get laughed at. But anyway, because of this, what happened later, it all got out. Now, apparently, at one point, I'm going to skip all the journey they made. And eventually, these US Special Ops team got to a point, a region, and they saw a cave entrance. And when they went up, just to make sure there were no enemy in there or whatever, they were suddenly attacked by what was described as a huge wild man of giant proportions. They say this guy was something like between 8 to 12 feet tall. He was massive, longer, a bit savage, like a loincloth on, but he was massive. And they were momentarily stunned at his appearance, as we all would be. And he caught them off guard as well by the sheer speed and power that this guy moved at. He just went to them. And he was also wielding this huge pole-type spear that was sharpened when he literally impaled the front soldier who was near the cave entrance, literally impaled the soldier on it. And people think that, we won't go into it, they think that was like the Anunnaki, because they're supposed to be quite big. But these are like ancient beings. Anyway, it could have just been a massive, massive guy. But we know it wasn't, because the rest of the team opened fire as this giant started to attack the rest of them that were further down this little bit of a slope from the cave. And they kept backing away, and they were like emptying magazine after magazine into this huge figure before he finally succumbed to his multiple wounds. Said they were shooting him and shooting him. They were having to back off to get another magazine in, letting go of that, just not taking the finger off the trigger. And they couldn't drop this guy. This is about like 4 or 5 people firing at him. Anyhow, like I said, they eventually dropped him. Now, I want you to digest that for a minute, because that is not the end of this story. In fact, my friends, it's only the beginning of something much stranger. Now, of course, by this time, this event has been written off as a silly conspiracy theory, you know how they do with the media. But when the establishment says that about anything and labels it as a silly conspiracy theory, you know damn well that 8 times out of 10, guys, they are dissing it because they're trying to cover over something. So it was a typical case of, oh, move along, there's nothing to see here, that's a load of rubbish, there was a gun battle, that was it was Al-Qaeda. No, it wasn't. Anyway, I kept a beady eye out for more info, but like many things that get blacked out by the agenda, things went quiet for a while. Until something completely looked unrelated and you joined the dots. It's something that reignited the curiosity. Because sometime after this, we started reading about all these leaders, and they were like this sudden rush or pilgrimage, if you will, of the world's most powerful leaders in the Western world at the time into Afghanistan. Now this, I believe, was during the early Obama regime. I can't remember what year it is, but if you think of like President Sarkozy, that Sarkozy fella, he was the president at the France at the time. I think he's in jail for a year now and then 2 years suspension, but at the time it was all that. And so he went over to Afghanistan, and I remember Germany's Angela Merkel, she went as well. You had Obama, you had all these things, the British Prime Minister, they all made a pilgrimage to see this place. And, that is interesting because these state leaders, before they were allowed to visit, there were some unnamed and unknown VIP elites that had already been and see what they'd found in one of these caves. Okay? So it's the same thing, and it was a week. And some of you might remember this. There was about maybe a week, 2 weeks. You couldn't go by a day without some leader making a surprise visit to visit the troops in Afghanistan, which actually amounted to very little time for the troops, because as soon as they got to the green zones, they go on quick sail on, then they were whisked off to an unclassified location. When they come back, they didn't bother with the troops, they were just flown right out again as well. And what was all the hoo-ha about? What was so interesting? Why people should go into a danger zone, leaders, where they can be assassinated, but as we know, they were probably safe then. But, what was designated outside the green zone in a very dangerous place, up in the mountains where Al-Qaeda was allegedly hiding, right? What could be so interesting? What was all the hoo-ha about? Well, it was about something called a Vimana. Vimana. And that's a 5,000-year-old flying machine thought to only have existed in ancient Hindu texts. And there's descriptions in the Bible in Ezekiel about similar things, about flying machines, wheels in wheels and spitting fire, which is typical from an ancient brain who'd never seen a flying machine before. You won't be able to describe it. But it was always thought that, it was just one of those legends in the old Hindu texts. A flying machine for the gods. And this flying machine could shoot bolts of lightning at their enemies and destroy their armies and everything. And let's not forget the carvings found in pyramids. If you look at the little picture there, that is out of a pyramid. It looks like modern planes, a helicopter, possibly a submarine, which we are taught couldn't be imagined by humans thousands of years ago, but you can see them there as plain as day on those carvings. I think they're about 5,000-6,000 years old. So it gels in a way. But forget Egypt, let's stick with Afghanistan, because all these things are there for us all to see. Now here is where it gets really interesting. By the time the place was made secure and safe enough for the elites and the shills to visit, let them have a look and stuff like that, got rid of. Get rid of them, they've seen it now. But these US military scientists were there, all ready to relate their findings. They call them US military scientists, but we're not sure whether they were all from the US. There might be an assured interest in this. But we know that it was the US Special Ops that were in charge of this. So anyways, they'd found this machine, and as far as I know, it was kind of floating. It was in a cave, and he's like, how did you get that damn thing out? Because it was like real narrow tunnel. It looked like it couldn't get in there in the first place. And it appeared to be kind of stationary, but not on anything. It was like above the ground, but nothing supporting it. So it was anti-gravity, it was floating. Anyhow, like I said, they quickly identified it as a Vimana from these ancient Hindu texts. They've got pictures of them. It was almost identical. In other words, something previously believed as a legend or a myth was not only actually real, but still physically existed in real time, in our time, 5,000 years later. And furthermore, it was active. They said it was floating. They thought it was on a stand, but they couldn't get close enough, as you'll hear in a minute. And they find out the hard way because of what happened next. See, the goal was to remove the Vimana and spirit it away back to America, obviously, to a facility like Area 51, so they could back-engineer it, similar to what happened in Roswell and other places. Except this wasn't a crashed UFO or UAP, unidentified aerial phenomena, which is the new name now. It was fully intact, and it appeared to be protected by some kind of force field. This is why they couldn't get close. But what a force field, again, this was technology beyond what we know now. So if you think the story is a bit weird up to this point, my friends, wait until you hear what happened next. When they tried to approach this machine, this Vimana, for removal, people started to disappear. Bang, like that. But as soon as they got close to it, they just vanished. They weren't zapped by any death ray or evaporated or anything like that. Nothing sci-fi. They just literally vanished in front of witnesses who were being kept at a safe distance, the other scientists. Now the report, and this, funnily enough, this has never changed over the many years. The reports are the same. They say at least 8 soldiers disappeared. They vanished into thin air before people's eyes when they got up close to this machine. And it's what they vanished in what the US military scientists later described as a time well. It was protected, this machine was protected in a time well, so anybody who got near it disappeared. Probably into another dimension, they don't know. And I heard later that more personnel had disappeared since then. And some of those were military connected scientists, but I think independent as well, specialists on something who've been brought in. So we know 8 soldiers went, but we know some of the scientists disappeared. Now whether they did that on purpose or by accident, I don't know. But these people were disappearing somewhere. So in other words, some what they thought was actually a force field, a protective force field, you know, like an invisible electric fence or something, was actually something that defied all physics. And that being, my friends, a portal into another dimension of time. I'm not forgetting, of course, that it had been hidden in a cave for the past 5,000 years. That's what they estimated how old this thing was. So what the US forces had stumbled on was something we would normally describe as out of this world, except it had been recorded in ancient manuscripts and poems as existing on Earth thousands of years ago. Thousands, 5,000 years ago, my friends. That's a long time. And it was another example of ancient yet advanced technology they keep dropping hints about. It was a UFO of kinds called what they called a Vimana, a flying machine, a flying vehicle. Now, just settling it down for a second, I've covered time slips before, and it seems a lot of people are interested in them, so I'm gonna dig up an old one for you at some point, rerun it again. But I'm not sure how many of you guys out there are into this kind of material, because it isn't for everyone. But anyway, it's buried, and He got buried, suppressed, nevertheless. And it doesn't exist as far as the establishment are concerned. Ancient technology is non-existent as far as they're concerned. Okay? It is. It's all over the damn planet. They just don't want to tell you about it. Whereas most of us believe the opposite, where people have a right to know about these things. And they should be left to make up their own mind for what exists and what doesn't. If they think it's going to send them mad, then don't read it, simple. Or just diss it. It's very easy to dismiss something, say, a lot of rubbish. And after all, you see, everybody on this planet who's ever existed, every human is born with what we call free will. It's not up to people to tell us what to think. But for some reason, they don't want us to know this kind of knowledge. It's taboo as far as they're concerned. Now, the thing the soon not to be elites have also been suppressing over a very long period of time. And yet these are revelations that will come out in the very near future, which I keep dropping hints about as well. And another thing, I'm going to dig this one up again. It's another time anomaly that was discovered in the Antarctic. We did this in a inner circle, a private podcast, but I'm going to try and root it out and redo it, make it more public, because it's out there in the public domain anyway. You know, it's out from NASA, so it's not a secret. But what this time anomaly was discovered in Antarctic, and it stumped all the NASA scientists who could only describe it as, well, it was a very interesting description, really, wasn't it? A river of time that appears to flow backwards, which defies all known physics. Just like the Vimana, it defies physics, because humans, these scientists, they think they know everything. They should be physics, forget physics, string theory, study sacred geometry if you want to get the secrets of the ancient world. Simple. And then they'll find out that there are other things that you can add to numbers, but I'm not going to go into that. So that was very interesting. This is coming from NASA. Can you imagine coming out with something that sounds like science fiction? But it's a river of time that appears to be flowing backwards. So as I say, it's all blown the physics we know now. It's blown it right out the water. And NASA, by the way, are also aware of these random time slips, which people disappear into, rarely to be seen again. Some come back, some don't. And we've had them popping up from the past into our timeline as well, like the poor dude in New York. He appeared somewhat like for a different time from maybe Victorian times, and he appeared in modern day New York in the middle of a road and got mowed over by a taxi. And he said the copper saw him. He said he was there with a top hat and everything, dressed like a gentleman from the Victorian times, and he looked stunned and bewildered. And next minute, it just appeared, and the taxi driver couldn't stop and bumped him. And unfortunately, he later died from that accident. But they found all this stuff in his pockets going back to the 19th century. It didn't exist anymore. Anyways, they are aware of them, NASA. Because they get these things and they go into them, they tell everybody it's folklore, but they go into heavy research. You see, the universe, guys, and nature isn't perfect. And it's not as well behaved as it's made out to be. And although it's extremely rare to run across one of these things, it also may be not as rare as we are led to believe. Because sometimes an ordinary person can encounter one of these random tears in the fabric of time, or what we call time, and indeed seemingly vanish into thin air and then pop up somewhere else in another dimension of time. Sometimes it can be in a past bygone time, and sometimes it could be in the future. And there are many, many, many stories by these people who have witnessed people vanishing in front of them. Not just one person, there's been quite a few witnesses watch people, and some have seen people disappear, fade away, and then come back to life, like back to solid form again. And one guy, during something like 15 minutes, had actually disappeared for 2 weeks. He came back with a beard, but to him, he just felt dizzy and leant against a wall. He didn't even know where he's been, but people around him saw him fade away. So it's really interesting to get into. And although we can take it as fiction, obviously people like NASA don't. The elites know all about it. They even have a name for them. We call them time slips or tours in time. They call them X points. Anyway, on these X points, they found quite a few of them across America. They're everywhere. They're on ley lines, basically. They're in your country somewhere, if you could find out where the ley lines are. Anyways, then we have the Afghan time well, and then the recent River of Time, as NASA called it, which has basically trashed physics completely. And like I said, I'll cover it more soon for those who are interested, because much of the stuff we've touched on in the past has always been dissed by the media and considered taboo by the establishment. You know, they don't want to reveal things to the blinkered masses, okay? But it will be revealed when the time is right and the blinkers of ignorance have been removed from everybody. And that's another work in progress right now. Hence all the confusion about who's really in charge, not just in Afghanistan, but of America, Britain and Europe. So I'm going to wind this one down with my original thoughts when I first heard about this Taliban takeover. I know it's a weird thing, but when you've done this for a long time, you do kind of automatically read between the lines. You remember something. You see, when the media and all this political talking heads are going on, banging on about Afghanistan's rare earth mineral deposits and vast reserves of lithium, and the Chinese are after it, and blah, de blah, de blah, they'll control the battery industry, all that, and I thought, to hell with the merchants of greed. And I doubt the Afghans are really all excited about lithium deposits, as mentioned, because that kind of technology that relies on lithium batteries will be outdated before it gets off the ground, when all this more advanced technology that's been suppressed has been released. Now, what I would like to know, this is what went through my mind right away, this Vimana popped into my head. I thought, wait a minute, who's got that? Is it still there? Did the US military scientists somehow manage to free this vehicle from this time well that it was trapped in? Because by the sounds of it, you know, it's a few years they didn't, it was still there. They couldn't move it. Maybe they found a way, I don't know, because this story totally gone, poof, way, it just stopped. It's just like someone put a tin lid on it. But likewise, did the personnel who disappeared return, or were they lost forever in some bygone time in the past, or indeed the future? That's what I was thinking about. It's just that knowing what we know about the elite powers that be, soon not to be, I simply can't see them abandoning this kind of advanced technology for some other power like China just to walk in and try to claim it. You know, somebody who may have a way how to get it out, or how to switch off this force field, this time well, as they call it. So the fear right now would more likely be fear of it dropping into the hands of China or some other rogue actors who could back engineer it to create weapons of mass destruction that we can't imagine yet. And this would be a new power that would make nuclear war and conventional war absolutely obsolete. I think we're getting to that point now, because nuclear war is more or less obsolete. They say there's a few tucked away, but they are useless. Don't worry about that. This new technology just renders it, sterilises them, end of story. It neuters them. And he always mentioned, you see, this one, you see, isn't a Roswell-type incident with a crashed UFO that's been, you know, smashed up. This is a piece of ancient technology which is obviously still active but can't be activated fully to fly because nobody can get near it to get inside to see how it works. And they're not big things, you know what I mean? It's not a big thing, they're only quite small. But in which case, if they can't move it, then they're going to have to destroy it or destroy the cave system, seal it up, hidden until another day in the future when they have the technology that can allow them to remove it or to investigate it further. Now, like I said, I cannot say for sure whether they eventually moved it or not. It just went quiet, okay? But my guess is they haven't been able to do it, and they've sealed it, and they've kind of changed the area. And it's been there like 5,000 years, so it's not as if the Afghanistanis themselves are really interested in it, because they think it's taboo and very unlucky to be up there, because, like I said, these things used to belong to what we call the ancient gods, so they would be terrified of going there. But like I said, you've got the Chinese trying to get in the back door now, saying lithium, but they could be trying to find out if this Vimana is still there. So when you dig down into these things, guys, you'll find the Afghan Vimana isn't an isolated case, nor is Roswell or other incidents of downed UFOs. Now, if you cast your mind back to 1990, when Saddam invaded Kuwait, okay, he invaded, well, he didn't actually. Something happened on the border. This was in August 1990, and Saddam actually went after something. He didn't say, let's invade Kuwait. I know there's all kinds of stuff around it, but that's the media. Always look behind the media. Now, the media spun the story about Iraq invasion of Kuwait, but they didn't explain why. They were, no, it's about money, and some said Kuwait was actually siphoning. It was the Kuwaiti oil wells near the border were actually siphoning off Iraqi oil fields, which is illegal. That was the excuse. Others say it was about money and everything, but it wasn't. There was actually a 2-day long operation when it first started. And the Iraqi troops, they swooped onto this crash site. And apparently, we don't know whether it was within the border of Iraq or Kuwait. It was like almost like on the border. Maybe in no man's land, we don't know. But we do know that they swooped on this crash site and they removed something unusual and of a fair size. But it was big enough to go to be transported out there. And it disappeared well before the US NEST team arrived. Now, what was the NEST team doing there? If you've never heard of them, NEST, it's formerly known as the Nuclear Emergency Search Team. But they dropped the word search later on. It's now called the Nuclear Emergency Support Team. And the idea is that they go to all these disasters, you know, where nuclear stuff's gone wrong. Maybe a nuclear missile, test missile has gone down, and they have to go and get it. But that is the cover. These guys actually look for UFOs. That's what allows them. They just use that so they can. It just allows them access anywhere in the world. Because people started catching on that they were searching areas around the world where crashed or down UFOs have been reported. I think this is why they later changed it from Nuclear Emergency Search Team, which wasn't nuclear, it meant UFO Emergency Search Team, to the Emergency Support Team. And that's weird, right? See, after all, if there was a nuclear accident, you wouldn't need to search for it. You know where it is. You can't hide incidents like Chernobyl disaster or Fukushima, both of which were not attended by NEST. So where were they? Nevertheless, anyway, back to the story. Saddam's troops got there first, spirited this thing away, whatever it was they found, and the American pursued it. When NEST got there, they had to get the military in to say he's already got it, he's already removed it. So they pursued it behind the smoke and mirrors of what they called the Gulf War, which, as you know, was a bit weird as well. It was another strange affair because the US military under George H.W. Bush Sr., that's W. Bush's daddy, at the time he baffled the world, if you remember, because he chased Saddam's troops back to Iraq. But he stopped on the border, he stopped from entering Baghdad. It just stopped instead of going in after it. And I think this was the time where they might have been on about weapons of mass destruction and that, but they stopped and they went back because it took another war, didn't it, to actually invade Iraq proper. Anyhow, as whispers at the time, the US intelligence had seen the package being spirited away over the border into Iran, where Saddam parked his entire Iraqi Air Force before the US destroyed him. And Iran is believed to have had at least 2 or 3 of these similar crafts of unknown origin as well. Then they are kept underground in this mountain-based fortress, which is surrounded by natural magnetic anomalies in the mountains. So basically they're impervious to bomb strikes, because fighter jet high-tech controls, they can't handle it, they can't fully function. That's why Israel are always on about striking Iran, but they know they can't get to them. It has to be a very, very nice day, and also they need more technology, but they still can't get to these. Where they're saying they're nuclear missiles, or they're doing all the nuclear research, it's not. It's very advanced technology what they're doing. They don't even. None of us need nuclear, my friends. We don't need nuclear energy anymore once Tesla's stuff's been released. So, it's all about future. But anyways, not forgetting as well that the mag-grav technology that's been knocking American ships out, and that can render modern technology useless, that was invented by an Iranian, probably from a back-engineered down craft. I mean, these crafts, they may be ET, they might not, they might be just advanced technology from the Antarctica, inner Earth, you don't really know. But that's where a lot of this technology comes from. So this guy's idea was, when he invented it, he wanted to give it freely to every country in the world. Not charge them, because what it does, it nullifies everything. It'd mean an end to war, because no country will be able to attack another because of this technology. So they say, what's the point of building weapons anymore? And this stuff can just knock everything out. Now, for some strange reason, the US at the time, and I don't know which one it was, who was in then, I can't even remember. Well, it might have been Bush Senior. But for some strange reason, the US admin then, they refused this technology. And then later, when they found out other people have it, they started begging for it, but then they were refused. Because it was obvious they intended to try and back-engineer it to find a weakness. But apparently there isn't one. It's just that we say, no, you miss your opportunity, you dissed it as rubbish, and now you're begging for it. I'm sorry everybody else has got it. You can't have it. This is why all these admins, US, threatening this, threatening that, Israel. I mean, how long have they been going to destroy Iran now? What, 20, 30, 40 years? And it's still there. They can't get anywhere close to it. There's a reason for that. Now, having said that, guys, this kind of technology has advanced in leaps and bounds since then. And Russia is way ahead of the game, including they've got new hypersonic missiles now, which at this moment in time are impossible to stop or shoot down by any country in the world. And these things can travel thousands and thousands of miles. Hypersonic. So you'll always see the twisted media interpretation of these events we're talking about once they've leaked into the public domain. They just try and make fun out of it. However, the backstory being buried always makes much more sense than the boring Mickey Mouse one that they try and push down the throats of the public. It just connects all the dots right, whereas the official stuff sometimes, it's why people say, I don't get it, I'm confused. So it's just another example how the elites use the wealth and the power to seize advanced technology for their own gain instead of developing it further for the benefit of human society. Now, thankfully, advanced technology that will eventually is going to find its way back into the hands of the people who will indeed use it to further humankind instead of making it into weapons and destroying humanity. Okay, my friends, so I hope you enjoyed that little sojourn through the Afghanistan Mountains in Bora Bora. Oh, by the way, right, before I go, I keep forgetting this. A web guy keeps dropping me this, that, and then somebody asked me the other day, but we keep getting emails about how they can donate outside of Podbean, this platform, which in the past I've asked people, please don't use it. Don't do it. I can't be doing with their own cyber currency golden beans please don't use them. Don't use them. It's not a good idea. I have to wait till Kingdom Come for the money, and then they take a huge chunk out. It's an absolute rip-off. It's their own digital money. Do not use it. So what the web guy's done, because they don't like you putting PayPal buttons and things like this on here, so what the web guy's done, he has created a PayPal me link below. I think that's some kind of donation button. I don't know. But it's PayPal, yeah, so it sounds like donation, but it doesn't say donation. So he's put one of those in the descriptions below, just in case any of you, if you want to show your appreciation for me burning the midnight oil and bringing you all this information, you know, you can do that. And I want to thank you again to all you guys who've downloaded the Little Uncanny Book of Predictions. Keep hold of that, you're going to enjoy it, trust me. It is a little bit weird, but just keep it there as a reference, all right? Keep it on your desktop, because you'll find a lot of that stuff. If you can't see it now, a lot of that is already happening behind the scenes. And I don't think it's uncanny per se, but then again, I've been doing this since we're a little boy. So, you know, there you go. Meanwhile, my friends, I am going to see you on the wind. Have a nice day.